Tori is the founder of KidNuz, and KidNuz, all about education, is a news program, a podcast for children. And we're going to talk today about how do we present that to kids, because there's a lot of really difficult issues. And as women, as mothers, we want to do the best for our family, and KidNuz can really slot that in and help them with current events. But first and foremost, Tori, I want to ask a little bit about yourself, and then I'm going to play a podcast so we can listen to what it sounds like. So Tori, tell us about your background.
Great. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here and talk about our podcast. So I was a broadcast journalist for 27 years. I started in the New York area in radio, and then moved to the San Francisco area and did about another 6 years in radio there, and then transitioned to television. And I was the morning co-anchor on the #1 morning newscast in the Bay Area, in San Francisco Bay Area, called Mornings on 2. And I did that for 19 years, just literally retired 5 years ago, like this week. So it's kind of a milestone. And after that, I went on and started doing some podcasts. I did some volunteer work. And so it's just been something that's been really nice to still be involved in the news, but to be able to have some flexibility and be able to write and record pretty much literally anywhere around the world. So when we were traveling, I recorded my podcast from Beijing and from Delhi and from Kuala Lumpur. So that was just a really nice benefit. And it's just very rewarding, especially the feedback we've gotten in the last 2 years.
And does the podcast really fit the bill for sharing the news, but it's audio?
Right. And that was very intentional, because kids spend so much time on screens right now. And so we thought, how great would it be for kids to listen and be able to hear what's going on, but not have their faces glued to a screen. And a lot of educators have really applauded us. We hadn't really thought about this, to be honest, but they said it really improves listening skills, because not only we usually have about 5 or 6 news stories, and then we have a little quiz at the end where I'll ask a question, we'll play a jingle, and then give the answer. And kids are so competitive, just love them. And they really want to do well on the quiz. So it really inspires them to listen carefully while I'm reading the stories, so they can do well on the quiz. And we keep the stories really short. There may be 45 seconds or something. And we try and intentionally keep it, rather on a basic level. We don't get, too far into the weeds, obviously. But that's been a really positive benefit, definitely.
Let's play an episode and listen to the style and kind of see how they put it together.
Quaker Oats is joining the widening conversation about race and bidding farewell to 131-year-old Aunt Jemima. Acknowledging that the character's origins are based on a stereotype, company execs are retiring both the name and the image tied to its pancake mix and syrup bottles. Revamp packaging with an as-yet unannounced logo will hit stores later this year. Pepsi, Quaker's corporate boss, isn't stopping there. It's pledging $400 million to lift up Black communities and increase company diversity. Don't take any wooden nickels is good advice unless you live in Tenino, Washington. The tiny rural town is taking a page from its past to help out residents whose finances have been pinched by the pandemic. Basically, the town is printing its own money, up to $300 per person on an 1890s printing press. The currency comes out in thin slices of maple veneer and is accepted at local supermarkets and gas stations. Business owners can then use it to make their own purchases or trade it in for real cash at City Hall. Some merchants have even hit upon a third, more lucrative option: coin collectors trying to get in on a little piece of history. Arcade games, golf, and swimming are a go. High fives, fist bumps, and hugs, not so much. As the NBA prepares to resume play at ESPN Sports Complex in Disney World on July 30th, it's released an exhaustive 6-phase, 113-page handbook regulating even the tiniest aspects of a player's life. Athletes, coaches, and support staff of the 22 teams entering the bubble in Orlando, Florida, must quarantine alone for 48 hours until getting 2 negative coronavirus tests. After that, they'll be tested regularly, sometimes daily. Among the new rules, no showering in locker rooms, no sharing towels or deodorant, and no hanging out in friends' rooms. And while playing cards is allowed, players must toss out the deck after each game. Now, our KidNuz quiz. What small town in Washington state is printing its own wooden money? Tenino, home to about 1,800 residents. What U.S. holiday will be celebrated tomorrow? Juneteenth, the day in 1865 when news of the end of slavery reached Texas 2 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamations. And in One for the Road, talk about a well-earned retirement. Sometime back, we told you about Diego, the 100-year-old giant tortoise credited with saving his entire species. During his decades-long service in a breeding program on the Galapagos Islands, Diego fathered approximately 800 offspring. This week, Diego was returned to his original home, an island off the coast of Ecuador, where he'll live out the rest of his life, which could be quite long. According to National Geographic, the oldest giant tortoise on record lived to the ripe old age of 152. Before we go, today's KidNuz birthday shout-outs go to Rudy in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and a California for Chelsea in Burlingame, and Laura in Manhattan Beach. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to try our Week in Review quiz on our website, and we'll see you back here for more KidNuz Monday morning.
My background is news and journalism as well, so I'm a bit of a fangirl with Tori, and I just I have a couple of questions I wanted to topics I want to talk about the program. You were saying off camera that trying to tell these difficult stories to children, like racism, Juneteenth, Aunt Jemima, also the pandemic. What kind of things go into that news meeting that help you say, okay, these are the right words or the right tone to talk to kids? Because I think a lot of parents don't know how to do it.
Yeah, it's, I mean, it's never easy, but I actually just wrote a blog post about this, about how we cover tough topics, because probably the first one, most challenging one we had to talk about was the pandemic, because the children who listen, you know, it's a wide range of age. It's basically grade school and through middle school. So you could have a 13-year-old listening, you could have a 6-year-old listening, and those children need very different, lessons, basically. So we touch on it for the youngest age group, but the way I like to look at it is we offer a door for the adults who are listening with the children, so that if they want to and they feel the children are ready, the adults can open that door and go down the path to offer more information. But if the adult thinks the child isn't ready, doesn't need any more information, they don't have to open that door, and they can move on to the next topic. And a perfect example is we had a friend of the podcast who has a 10-year-old daughter, and she was in the car with her father listening to NPR for about 2 minutes, and she heard about George Floyd and how he was calling out for his mother as he died. And she burst into tears and was inconsolable. And so that is something that we would never want to have happen, because it's, a child cannot unhear something. You can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. So that's why I feel we really are partners with the adults, and they can choose how far they want to go. So I tend to feel we should err on the side of caution. I don't think we should shy away or ignore big topics, but just be very careful how we handle them.
One thing I was wondering is, how much feedback do you have from parents and teachers that have helped you mold and develop KidNuz?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We have been getting more feedback, obviously, as our audience grows. A lot of teachers who listen in the classroom, and obviously now remotely with the online classes, they think it's a great way to introduce some current events to kids. And they love the length of it. They love the story selection. And the parents also say it really sparks good, interesting conversations, which is so rewarding. That was actually a big goal of ours. And we also heard from another child who said they really feel like they can be part of adult conversations now because they have an idea of at least some things that are going on in the world. And we love the concept of broadening a child's horizon so that they're not just so isolated into their own little world, their own town and circle of friends, but to realize there's a lot of other things going on out there. So that's been really rewarding. We have heard some comments of, why haven't you talked about this? My child can't, we have a curfew in our town. My child wants to know why, what's going on in the news that I can't go outside, after 6 o'clock or 8 o'clock. And so we appreciate that. I mean, we really look forward to hearing feedback, positive and negative. And that definitely, we listen to it and absorb it. And if we think it makes sense, we will incorporate it.
How about the story mix? You have sports, you have fun stuff, amusement parks and the hot dog eating contest, and you have the serious stuff. How do you line up those stories? And are you looking every day for, I need a sports story or I need a feel good story? How do you go with that for planning?
Yeah, I write one day a week. So I usually spend a day or two before, and I'm looking at as many different websites as I can, newspapers and TV and all over the world. But we are primarily U.S. focused. That is where the predominant number of our audience is located. And you can immediately tick off, no stories involving, death or dying or sex or drugs or excessive politics. And we do touch upon politics, but we do keep it very neutral. We say one side says this and the other side says that, which we think is very important. And we also, obviously, we're very mindful of involving positive stories for girls, and especially science, engineering, and, so it's not just, boys do this and girls do that. It's boys and girls can do anything. And again, our favorite stories are young kids or, school-age kids who do cool things. So that, and nice things, who are empathetic also.
And the women that you work with you guys are all powerhouse women in media with a lot of experience. And I wonder, what kind of advice would you give maybe some of our Scptr moms in terms of how to evaluate news?
I definitely feel it's so important. It has to be from a credible source. What you're seeing on your Facebook feed, if it sounds a little skeptical, it probably is. Go and try, and it's so easy these days. Do some research and said, is this true? And is it from some other reliable sources? And get news from a variety of sources. I mean, I have everything from MSNBC to Fox News, on my feed. So I can see, well, one side saying this, the other side saying that. And I think that's really important to teach that to children. And obviously with very young kids, you can control a lot more what they're watching, but as they get older, it's really important to have those conversations. And I really, my kids are pretty news savvy. Obviously they kind of had to be, news. But you want to make sure they get news beyond just social media, and be able to have some intelligent conversations, know what's going on in the world. And that's one of our goals, is to spark an interest in journalism, not just any journalism, but good quality journalism, because one of my favorite quotes from Thomas Jefferson is, "Our liberty is dependent on freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost." So freedom of the press is so paramount for our entire, democracy. And it's just really important to support that.
What's your pitch to a parent right now about KidNuz?
Well, I had our mission, which I think is important to share. Our mission is to engage the next generation with news that will inform without fear and educate without opinion. Why? Because kids are curious, the world is fascinating, and knowledge is power. And I really think you just have a small window of time when kids are genuinely curious about what's going on in the world. So it's really important to be able to capture that and obviously take advantage of it, but to use that and find out why things happen the way they do, and just get them give them the ability, even if we can't travel right now, but just to be able to explore, different corners of humanity and raise awareness and empathy. I think that's so important because once you're educated, once you know different people, then you have a lot more compassion for them, and I think you'll just be a better person. So yeah, I just feel 100% behind what we're doing, and it's such a rewarding experience to be able to be involved in something like this, and getting such positive feedback is really special. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it with you today.